Hey everyone, it's Josh from Sharm Vision, and today I am going to be talking about grief. So grief is something that a lot of us experience in our lives. It's something I've personally experienced. So I just wanted to share my story and some insights on that today. So when I was 15, my brother Sam passed away from muscular dystrophy at the age of 19. This was a very big event and changed the course of my entire family's life. As a 15-year-old boy, this was quite difficult for me to deal with, so as a result, I just pushed it all down. I remember at the time being like, oh, I'm surprisingly okay, like I'm actually alright with it, you know. Little did I know that I was doing the most worst thing possible to deal with it, but what can you do? So I went through this period of about 7 years, just kind of being okay, felt good about life. It bubbled up to the surface in nasty ways sometimes through rage and outbursts, random bouts of, oh, I'm so upset about it, where's that from? It's because you're not dealing with it. This kind of went on for a while, feeling okay. It affected my relationships with women, how I deal with wanting a girlfriend and things like that. They come up in a number of different ways, to be honest, but I think my relationships and connections to people was one of the worst ways that it was kind of affected, as grief is the demon of the heart chakra. Fast forward to when I was 22 years old, I kind of just went through, in the midst of a spiritual awakening, super crazy period, this grief had to come to the surface to be dealt with, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to move forward. This was very, very, very difficult, apart from the fact that I had experienced grief. I'd gone a long time being okay and happy and loving life, despite having obvious kind of issues. This went on with me kind of dealing with all the effects of repressing it, as opposed to sitting and crying every day and being like, oh, I miss my brother. This was all the numbness and all of the like avoidancy and all of the just really heavy, bland, sludgy energy that had built up over the years as a result of me repressing this grief. So the fact that I'd repressed it was almost as bad as the fact that I'd experienced it, as it's now 4 times harder to deal with, as it's all coming up at once and there's all this stuff around it from repressing it that doesn't need to be there. That was nearly 5 years ago now. Look at me now, guys. 5 years later, I'm in Bali with my girlfriend. Yes, I still face challenges. Yes, I still have issues around this, but it's in Bali that I've realised a few things and have gained new insights around my grief and what it means to me, and I just really wanted to share that with you guys today. So the first thing that I've kind of realised is that grief can actually become befriended. It is always something I've seen as this nasty, heavy, unnecessary, unneeded part of myself, which I disowned. I didn't want it. This isn't me. It's like this big scary thing that's ruined my life. It hasn't actually ruined my life. If anything, it's made my life better in this sort of silver lining, long run way. Without this grief, I simply wouldn't be where I am today. I've learned over time that parts of us, through my shamanic practice, through doing therapy work with my girlfriend Luna Guidance, who's on Instagram as well, we have different parts of ourselves that you can call a family, and you can connect to each part of yourself and counsel it, give it healing, talk to it, connect to it as you would a child, or even on my end of the spectrum through my shamanic practice, a plant spirit or a spirit guide or an energy that you can kind of connect to and learn from. Grief is most certainly one of these parts of ourselves that we can connect to, and it's only through coming to Bali with this soft, feminine, healing energy that she holds that I've realised I can kind of connect to my grief and befriend it and counsel it and learn from it. And that's probably one of my next points, is that grief is just one of the best teachers that there are. Grief has just fully taken my life and thrown it up in the air and taken me to so many places that I simply wouldn't be without it. Much like ayahuasca or the mushroom, or even something like cannabis and tobacco, these are plant spirits I work with, also known as plant teachers. People connect to these spirits to learn from them, to gain healing and insights about life and the universe. I much now see grief, like I mentioned before, a part of ourselves that we can connect to, much in the same way as a plant teacher, as a teacher from the self, from the soul, from life itself. Without this grief, I wouldn't be able to see deeply into things. Without this grief, I'd probably be bothered more about things in my life. For those of you who have dealt with grief somewhat effectively, you will know as well as I do that stuff just doesn't matter as much as it should, or that you think it does after you've experienced grief. Like, there are much more important things in life, and I feel like I'm able to see through the kind of darkness, through the clouds, into the distance, as a result of gaining this, I guess you could call, superpower of having had grief and worked with it, learned from it and healed from it. I see grief as a form of initiation. Without having the experience of grief, I simply wouldn't have come to the point where I am at this present moment. I would not be able to hold the capacity for pain, for light, for love, and for healing and caring for others, and understanding, most importantly. Without grief, I simply would not have these things. So basically, it's taken me a long time to heal from this grief. I feel like grief is something that never goes away. People often say to you, oh, don't worry, it gets better with time. Yes, that is definitely true. But I think I spent so long trying to get rid of and to completely remove and heal my grief without realizing that it's a part of me that will always stay and never go away. Once you realize that grief is here to stay for the rest of your life, that doesn't mean you can't have a happy and productive and healthy life moving forward, but once you realize that it's here to stay and is a big part of you that can be befriended and can be healed from and can teach you and you can learn from it, you start to realize that it's a lot more important for you to befriend your grief and heal from it in a healthy way rather than get rid of it, repress it, or avoid it. I've drawn a little diagram here for what I feel is a lesson that I can perfectly illustrate, is that through repressing my grief and feeling, oh, I just need a couple of ayahuasca ceremonies and it's fine, and realizing that grief is not something that you just go from A to B with. I used to think healing was linear, and even in Bali I've realized that it's not like this. So basically, I don't know how well you guys can see here, but I used to think you have trauma and then come to a place of healing. But I've now realized from an old diagram that I've seen before that time is a cycle and not a line. You start to see that once you have trauma and you want to heal from it in a healthy way, it isn't just a straight line from A to B. It's almost like a cycle or a spiral in which you go through processes of healing, and then a lesson comes, and then more healing, and then another lesson, which brings more healing, which brings more lessons, which brings more healing, which brings more lessons. And it's not so much that you can see the light at the end of the tunnel from being healed or unhealed. It's that with each revolution round the spiral with more lessons and healings, you now see deeper into the center of your trauma with new insight and new awareness and consciousness. And this is how healing, in my eyes, specifically from trauma or grief, works. It's not a linear thing where you're like, oh, I can't wait till I'm better. In essence, that part of you will never be quote unquote better. It's your life around it which becomes better. It's through understanding and healing and learning and just going forth on your journey with courage and with love and with compassion that you start to understand yourself and your trauma on a much deeper and better level. So for those of you who are maybe thinking, I can't wait to be healed, I can't wait to be healed, I can't wait to be healed, just understand that it's about the journey, not the destination, man. I know that sounds cheesy, but I've learned even now from coming to Bali that that is inherently true. It's through my shamanic practice, through emotional clearing, through spiritual practices, through healing in general and therapy that I've realized that pain is not something that can destroy our lives. If or worked with unwisely or without the proper techniques, yes, it can take over and cause huge damage to ourselves and others in our lives. But through practices such as alchemy, transformation, healing and therapy, I've come to learn that pain is actually a source of power. We can use this pain to transform and transmute not only ourselves but our lives, and kind of gain almost like a superpower, as the lessons and knowledge and power that come from having pain are so much greater than if you hadn't experienced the pain. So that's not to say that everyone should go through life and seek out painful experiences, but pain is avoidable in this life. But with the proper techniques, you can actually learn to transmute it and create new and better situations, lives and experiences for yourselves and others. I've actually drawn another diagram. Someone showed this one to me. So basically this is your life. This is what happens on a daily basis. Then you experience grief and it becomes your life. It is unavoidable. There is no escaping it for those who know what that's like. People say it will get better, it will get better. Yes, it does, but the grief never goes away, which is why you always have your grief. But what grows is your life around it. So your life gets better. The grief will never go away, but you can learn to work with it, you can heal it, and you can increase the capacity to hold love and light, knowledge and understanding in your life through these experiences. I also quite like that this diagram is also a very basic representation of a cell, further illustrating my point that much like the phoenix, new life and new understanding can be brought from these painful experiences. There is much support, understanding, compassion and techniques available to deal with this pain and this grief and all these sad situations in life. If this is something that you have been dealing with and would like to speak about, receive healing and guidance from, or just work with your grief in a newer, safer and deeper way with something you may not have experienced before, my shamanic sessions are perfect for this kind of work, to allow you to just see in a new light different parts of yourself that you hadn't before and how to move forward from them. I use many different techniques: spiritual healing, shamanic work, emotional clearing, as well as intuitive guidance, to just bring you into a place of peace and understanding with the parts of yourself you may have repressed. I'd love to share this with anyone who's interested, so please contact me and I would love to share this with you guys. Peace and love, and I'll speak to you soon.